The black fabric pressed against my eyes wasn't quite thick enough to block all light, but it made details impossible to discern. I sat wedged between two other scientists in the back of what I assumed was a van, based on the engine sound and suspension movement. There were 7 of us in total, all recruited for this classified project, all equally blind at the moment. "Is this really necessary?" asked a woman's voice to my right. Dr. Lisa Chen, if I remembered correctly from our brief introductions outside the Las Vegas facility. "Standard protocol, ma'am," replied one of our military escorts. His voice carried the flat affect of someone who'd given the same answer dozens of times. I tried to maintain my mental map as we drove, counting turns. Left, straight for approximately 2 minutes. Right, another right. After 20 minutes, the pattern of accelerations, decelerations, and turns became too complex to track. It was a deliberate tactic, I realized, ensuring none of us could retrace our path. "Anyone else find this excessive?" muttered a man across from me. "We're scientists, not spies." "Speak for yourself," someone else joked weakly. The tension in the van was palpable. I adjusted my position, trying to get comfortable. My credentials as a physicist specializing in gravitational anomalies had earned me this invitation, though the details had been frustratingly vague. The government representative who'd contacted me mentioned only unprecedented phenomena and national security implications. The drive continued for what felt like eternity. My watch had been confiscated along with our phones and other personal items, but based on the stiffness in my legs and the growing discomfort of sitting blindfolded, I estimated nearly 3 hours had passed. Finally, the van stopped. Doors opened, and hands guided us out one by one. "Step up here, Dr. Morrison," said a voice as firm hands gripped my upper arm. I felt concrete beneath my feet, then carpet. The air changed, cooler, filtered. We'd entered a building, more walking, more turns. Finally, we stopped. "You may remove your blindfolds," announced a new voice, crisp with authority. I pulled the fabric from my eyes, blinking against the sudden fluorescent brightness of a conference room. 6 other scientists did the same, all of us taking in our surroundings with the hungry eyes of people deprived of visual input for hours. The conference room was unremarkable. Beige walls, no windows, a long table with comfortable chairs. What caught my attention was the man standing at the head of the table. Tall, with close-cropped, salt and pepper hair and the rigid posture only career military officers maintain. He surveyed us with steel gray eyes that revealed nothing. "I'm Colonel James Hartley," he said without preamble. "You've been selected for your expertise in various scientific disciplines. Before we proceed, you'll need to sign these." An aide distributed thick documents to each of us. "Lifetime secrecy agreements," Colonel Hartley continued. "Breaking confidentiality is treason. The penalty is prison. No exceptions." I flipped through the pages, skimming the dense legal language. The document essentially required us to forfeit our right to discuss anything we might see, hear, or do at this facility. Ever. "This is extremely unusual," said Dr. Chen, the quantum physicist I'd briefly met earlier. She was petite, with sharp, observant brown eyes and a practical bob haircut. "What about contacting our families, our departments?" Colonel Hartley's expression didn't change. "Your universities and research institutions have been informed you're on extended assignments with the government. Family contact will be limited but permitted under supervision." The room fell silent as we all considered the implications. Whatever waited for us here was significant enough to warrant extraordinary security measures. Dr. Robert Kumar, a tall man with stylish glasses and distinguished silver streaks in his dark hair, voiced what many of us were thinking. "This level of secrecy suggests something beyond conventional research. Sign the documents and you'll see for yourselves," Hartley replied. I hesitated, pen hovering above the signature line. My academic career had been built on open inquiry and peer review. Secrecy ran counter to scientific progress. And yet, the scientist in me burned with curiosity. What could possibly warrant such measures? One by one, we signed. When all 7 documents were collected, Colonel Hartley nodded to the guards at the door. "Follow me." We were led through a series of hallways to an elevator that required both a key card and retinal scan to operate. Once inside, Colonel Hartley pressed the lowest button on a panel that seemed to have far more floors than the building we'd entered should contain. The elevator began to descend, and descend, and keep descending. I counted seconds in my head, estimating our speed. After 2 full minutes of continuous downward movement, we finally stopped. "We must be at least 30 floors underground," I said, unable to contain my surprise. "More," was all Colonel Hartley offered in response. The doors opened to reveal a checkpoint with armed guards, X-ray machines, and metal detectors. "Another security sweep," Hartley explained as we were guided through the process. Beyond this checkpoint was another, then another. Each required different clearance protocols. The progression of security measures told its own story. Whatever lay at the center of this facility was protected by layers upon layers of containment. Finally, we passed through a decontamination chamber and entered what appeared to be the main laboratory complex. The space was vast, easily the size of a football field, filled with equipment I recognized and some I didn't. My eyes widened as I took in the array of instruments. Gravitational field detectors lined one wall, advanced models I'd only read about in theoretical papers. Parts of what looked like a scaled-down particle accelerator curved through another section. Radiation monitoring systems, more sophisticated than anything I'd seen before, surrounded the perimeter. But what drew all our attention was the structure at the center of the lab. A large, sealed door, reinforced and covered with warning signs in multiple languages. The universal symbols for radiation, biological hazard, and electrical danger were prominently displayed, along with others I didn't recognize. "That's where we're going," Colonel Hartley said, watching our reactions closely. For the first time since this strange journey began, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lab's cool temperature. Whatever lay beyond that door had prompted unprecedented security measures, required experts from multiple scientific disciplines, and warranted warning symbols I couldn't even identify. But alongside the apprehension came a surge of excitement. As a scientist, I lived for the unknown, for questions waiting to be answered. And behind that door lay something so significant that the government had gone to extraordinary lengths to study it in secret. Dr. Chen caught my eye, her expression mirroring my own mixture of caution and curiosity. Dr. Kumar adjusted his glasses, leaning forward slightly as if drawn toward the mystery. Colonel Hartley moved toward the sealed door, gesturing for us to follow. "Welcome to Project Threshold," he said. "It's time you saw what you'll be working on." Colonel Hartley placed his palm on a biometric scanner beside the reinforced door, and a series of mechanical clicks echoed through the laboratory as multiple locks disengaged. 2 guards stepped forward and helped pull the massive door open, revealing a short corridor that led to another sealed entrance. "The chamber itself is behind the second door," Hartley explained as we followed him into the corridor. "We maintain negative pressure between the doors as an added containment measure." The air felt noticeably thinner as we passed through. When the outer door sealed shut behind us, pressure equalized with a soft hiss before the inner door's locks released automatically. "I should warn you," Hartley said, pausing with his hand on the final door. "What you're about to see challenges everything you think you know about physics." The door swung open to reveal a control room filled with monitoring equipment, computer stations, and large viewing screens. But what immediately caught my attention wasn't the technology. It was the image displayed on the central monitor. The screen showed a spherical chamber, perhaps 30 feet in diameter, with smooth, featureless gray walls. In the exact center of this sphere, a basketball hovered motionless in midair. That's live footage, Hartley said, noting our reactions. The ball has been floating there, untouched, for 3 weeks. I stared at the screen, looking for cables, air jets, or some other mechanism that would explain the suspended ball. There were none. If you're wondering about magnets or other tricks, Hartley continued, we've already ruled them out. The chamber walls contain no metal. There are no hidden supports, no air currents, nothing. Dr. Chen stepped closer to the monitor. Is this some kind of zero-gravity environment? Not exactly, Hartley replied. Watch this. He nodded to a technician who pressed a series of keys, bringing up a different video clip. This footage showed a soldier entering the chamber through what appeared to be an airlock. He carried several objects: a pen, a book, and what looked like an apple. The soldier walked to the center of the chamber, released the objects, and stepped back. Instead of falling to the floor, the items remained exactly where he'd released them. We found this chamber by accident, Hartley explained. Construction crews were excavating for a new weapons storage facility when they broke through into an existing cavity. This chamber was inside, though we have no idea who built it or why. It's not on any architectural plans, and the construction techniques don't match any known methods. I shook my head. What you're describing is physically impossible. Objects can't just float in place indefinitely. They'd need to be subjected to equal gravitational forces from all directions simultaneously, which would... My voice trailed off as my brain caught up with what I just said. Equal gravitational forces from all directions. That would require gravity to be generated by the chamber itself, not just Earth's pull. Can I see the raw sensor data? I asked, professional skepticism kicking in despite the compelling video. Hartley gestured to a workstation. Everything we've collected is available to you and your team. You'll find it makes for interesting reading. For the next several hours, I pored over the data, looking for flaws or alternative explanations. The more I examined, the more my scientific certainty crumbled. Gravitational measurements inside the chamber showed patterns that should have been impossible. Objects placed precisely in the center experienced a perfect cancellation of gravitational forces, while objects placed slightly off-center moved in trajectories that violated basic principles of physics. This is incredible, I finally admitted, rubbing my tired eyes. The gravitational field inside the chamber doesn't just counteract Earth's gravity. It seems to generate its own localized field with the central point as some kind of null zone. Dr. Kumar looked up from his own analysis. The implications are staggering. If we could understand the principles at work here, we could potentially develop artificial gravity for space travel, or even gravity shielding technologies. Colonel Hartley, who had been quietly observing our reactions, spoke up. That's exactly why you're all here. To understand what we're dealing with and determine its potential applications. The next 2 weeks were the most intellectually challenging of my career. Our team worked around the clock, analyzing data from previous experiments and conducting new ones remotely. We sent various objects into the chamber, different materials, shapes, masses, and electronic devices, all yielding results that defied conventional physics. My focus was on the gravitational anomalies. The readings contradicted general relativity in ways that would have Einstein scratching his head. The gravitational waves generated by the chamber walls seemed to fold back on themselves, creating a bubble of space where normal rules didn't apply. Meanwhile, my colleagues made equally disturbing discoveries. Dr. Chen identified time variations. Clocks placed at different points in the chamber ran at measurably different rates. Dr. Kumar detected quantum fluctuations that suggested the boundary between our reality and something else was unusually thin inside the chamber. Dr. Sarah Williams, our materials scientist, found evidence of exotic particles appearing and disappearing at the chamber's center. Dr. Michael Torres documented impossible gravitational wave patterns. Dr. Jennifer Park's sensors revealed dimensional distortion that hinted at space itself being compressed or expanded within the sphere. and Dr. Alan Foster detected radiation types that had no classification in our current understanding of physics. Late one evening, as I was compiling our findings, Colonel Hartley entered the lab accompanied by a young soldier. "Dr. Morrison, I'd like you to meet Private Daniel Jackson," Hartley said. "He's volunteered for our next phase of testing." I looked up sharply. "Human testing? That's premature. We've barely scratched the surface of understanding what's happening in that chamber." The young private stood at attention, looking nervous but determined. He couldn't have been older than 24, with close-cropped blonde hair and clear blue eyes that held a mix of apprehension and excitement. "With respect, sir," Private Jackson said, "I understand the risks." "No," I countered. "You don't. None of us fully understands the risks. We've seen electronic equipment malfunction inside the chamber. We've documented unexplained radiation. We have no idea what prolonged..." "No vital signs detected," I reported, staring at the bank of monitors. Each display showed the same thing, an empty, spherical chamber. Private Daniel Jackson had stepped inside 15 minutes ago, and now he was gone. Completely gone. Dr. Lisa Chen checked her instruments again, her fingers tapping rapidly across the keyboard. Confirmed. No heat signature, no mass reading, nothing. Colonel Hartley leaned in behind us, his face hardening. "What the hell happened to my soldier?" "I don't know," I admitted, replaying the footage from the chamber cameras. One moment Jackson stood in the center of the spherical room, and the next, he simply wasn't there anymore. There was no flash of light, no distortion effect, just a man present in one frame and absent in the next. "Could the cameras have glitched?" Colonel Hartley asked. I shook my head. "We have 4 separate cameras recording from different angles. They all show the same thing." I pointed to another screen displaying sensor data. "And it's not just visual. All our instruments confirm he's no longer in that chamber." Hartley paced the control room, then grabbed a radio. "This is Colonel Hartley. I want search teams combing the entire facility perimeter. We have a missing soldier. Repeat, missing soldier. Find him." "Sir," I said, "I don't understand how he could reach the surface. The chamber is sealed. We watched him enter, and no one opened the door. Even if he somehow exited without us seeing, he'd still need to pass through multiple security checkpoints." The colonel's eyes locked onto mine. "Are you suggesting he just vanished into thin air, Doctor?" "I'm suggesting we consider all possibilities, including ones that may seem unconventional." "Find him," Hartley repeated to his radio, then turned to the rest of us. "I want every piece of data analyzed. Figure out what happened in that chamber." For the next 8 hours, we pored over sensor readings, video footage, and atmospheric data. Dr. Kumar suggested the chamber might have temporarily opened a passage to another location. Dr. Williams thought Jackson might have been transformed into energy. Dr. Torres calculated possible trajectories if the gravitational anomalies had somehow launched him through solid matter. None of our theories seemed to fit the data. Then the radio crackled. "Colonel, this is Search Team Bravo. We found him." Hartley snatched up the radio. "Report. Private Jackson is unconscious but alive, sir. He's in the desert, approximately 20 miles northwest of the facility." I exchanged looks with Dr. Chen. 20 miles away. That was impossible. "Medical status?" Hartley asked. "Stable vital signs, some dehydration, no visible injuries. He's just out cold, sir." "Bring him in immediately," Hartley ordered. When they brought Jackson back to the facility medical bay, I was among the first to examine him. He looked exactly the same as when he'd entered the chamber. Same uniform, same physical appearance. The only difference was his state of consciousness and the desert sand dusting his boots. 6 hours later, Jackson woke up. I was there when his eyes opened. "Private Jackson," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You're in the medical bay. Do you remember what happened?" He looked at me with confusion. "I stepped into the chamber like I was told. Then, I was floating in darkness. It felt like maybe a few seconds passed, and then I woke up here. Did something go wrong with the test?" I glanced at Colonel Hartley, who stood at the foot of the bed. "You were missing for over 14 hours, Private." Jackson's face registered shock. "That's not possible. It was only seconds." Over the next day, I interviewed Jackson 5 separate times, recording each session and comparing his accounts. His story never changed. He remembered entering the chamber, a brief sensation of floating in darkness, and then waking in the medical bay. He had no memory of being in the desert or of the 14 hours that had passed. I compared his story with our sensor data, focusing on the temporal anomalies Dr. Chen had previously identified. The time distortion measurements showed patterns consistent with theoretical models of wormhole travel, a concept I'd only encountered in academic papers, never in reality. "What do you think happened?" Colonel Hartley asked when I presented my findings. "Based on the data," I said carefully, "I believe the chamber somehow transported Private Jackson to another location. The time discrepancy suggests he either experienced extreme time dilation or moved through some kind of shortcut in space-time." "You're talking about teleportation," Hartley said flatly. "I'm talking about possibilities that our current understanding of physics can't fully explain." 3 days later, Colonel Hartley brought 3 more volunteers: Sergeant Rita Martinez, Corporal Thomas Brown, and Private Emily Davis. Despite my objections about the risks of continued human testing, Hartley was determined to replicate the experiment. Each soldier entered the chamber separately. Each vanished. And each reappeared hours later in the desert, unconscious but otherwise apparently unchanged. As I mapped their recovery locations, a pattern emerged. Every subject was found along a roughly northwest line from the facility, with the distance correlating to their time missing. Martinez, who disappeared for 6 hours, was found 9 miles away. Brown, missing for 10 hours, turned up 16 miles away. Davis, gone for 12 hours, was recovered 19 miles away. "They're all moving in the same direction," I told Dr. Chen as we analyzed the data, "and at roughly the same speed." She did the calculations, then looked up at me with wide eyes. "That's impossible." "What?" "If we calculate their apparent velocity based on distance traveled and time elapsed." She showed me her work. "They're moving faster than light." I checked her math, then checked it again. She was right. If the soldiers were, indeed, traveling from the chamber to their recovery locations, they were doing so at speeds that violated Einstein's theory of relativity. "Maybe they're not actually traveling through normal space," I suggested. "What if the chamber creates some kind of tunnel or bridge?" Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "A wormhole, or something like it." The implications were staggering. If the chamber was creating passages through space-time, tunnels that allowed nearly instantaneous travel over great distances, we discovered something that could revolutionize not just physics, but human transportation, space exploration, possibly even our understanding of reality itself. But one question kept bothering me. Who built this chamber, and why? When I shared our findings with the full research team, Dr. Kumar raised another troubling point. If the chamber creates tunnels to somewhere else, where do these tunnels lead? So far, we've only documented endpoints in our immediate desert region. But what if the tunnels can reach further? What if they connect to elsewhere? "You mean other countries?" asked Dr. Torres. Kumar hesitated. "I mean anywhere. Other continents, other planets, other realities." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Private Jackson and the others, floating in darkness for what felt like seconds to them, but hours to us. I thought about tunnels through space-time, about speeds faster than light, about physics broken and remade. Something extraordinary had happened to those test subjects, something that challenged every law of physics I'd spent my career studying, and we were just beginning to understand what it meant. I stayed in my office late that night, reviewing the notes from our interviews with the soldiers. The recurring pattern in their testimonies was too consistent to ignore. They all experienced what felt like seconds of darkness while actually being gone for hours, and all reappeared along the same directional path. Their stories corroborated our data, suggesting some kind of spatial distortion or wormhole effect. After analyzing the data from the initial chamber entries, where Private Jackson, Sergeant Martinez, Corporal Brown, and Private Davis had all disappeared and reappeared at varying distances from the facility, Colonel Hartley approved a second round of chamber entries. All 4 soldiers would continue with additional exposures according to a carefully structured testing schedule. Jackson went in first for his second entry, and this time he was missing for nearly 18 hours before being found 27 miles northwest of the facility. When he woke in the medical bay, I noticed subtle changes in his demeanor. He answered questions with one-word replies, his gaze fixed on the middle distance rather than making eye contact. "Do you remember anything more this time?" I asked him during our follow-up interview. "Darkness," he said. His voice sounded flat, but not empty. Moving. Moving how? Like a tunnel, going through something. This was new information. None of the subjects had previously described a tunnel-like sensation. I made detailed notes and shared them with the team. When Private Jackson entered the chamber a third time a few days later, the changes became impossible to ignore. He returned after 22 hours, and during his medical evaluation, he barely spoke at all. He answered basic questions with nods or shakes of his head, and when not directly engaged, he sat motionless, staring at the wall. "Has he been sedated?" I asked Dr. Williams as we observed him through the medical bay window. She checked her clipboard. "No, this is his baseline state now. His vitals are normal, but his behavior..." She trailed off, looking troubled. Similar patterns emerged with the other test subjects. Sergeant Martinez, a formerly outgoing and confident soldier, began checking corners and doorways after her third chamber entry. By her fourth trip, she was openly accusing staff members of tampering with her food and monitoring her thoughts. The physical changes started subtly. I first noticed it in Jackson's skin, a slight textural difference, almost like fine sandpaper when viewed up close. His eyes had also changed. When light hit them at certain angles, they reflected back with an unusual, bluish tint, similar to some nocturnal animals. Dr. Williams conducted a full physical examination after Jackson's fourth chamber entry. "His bone density has increased by 18% since his baseline scan," she told me, showing me the comparison images. "And look at this muscle mass development. He's gaining significant lean tissue without any change in exercise regime or diet." "Could it be some kind of radiation effect from the chamber?" I asked. Williams shook her head. "I've never seen radiation cause targeted growth like this. It's as if his body is adapting to something." She ordered comprehensive genetic tests for all 4 regular chamber subjects. A week later, she called an emergency meeting with our research team. "I've triple-checked these results," she said, distributing copies of her findings. "The DNA samples from our subjects show alterations that should be biologically impossible." I studied the charts, my stomach tightening. The genetic sequences showed reorganization at a fundamental level, with entirely new nucleotide patterns that matched nothing in our databases. "These changes are accelerating with each chamber exposure," Williams continued. "Private Jackson's samples from yesterday show a 38% deviation from human baseline." "What does that mean in practical terms?" Dr. Kumar asked. "It means he's becoming something else," I said quietly. The transformation proceeded faster than any of us anticipated. 10 days after his 5th chamber entry, Jackson's skin had taken on a definite grayish cast. Small bony protrusions had begun forming along his hairline and the ridge of his skull. His fingers had elongated by nearly an inch, and X-rays showed developing secondary joints. Sergeant Martinez underwent even more dramatic changes. Her facial structure elongated, her jaw extended forward, and her teeth became noticeably sharper. The morning after her 6th chamber entry, she attacked a guard who brought her breakfast, biting deeply into his forearm before being restrained. Colonel Hartley ordered all transformed subjects moved to specially constructed isolation cells in the facility's lower level. I objected, arguing they needed medical care, not confinement. "They are still human beings," I insisted. Hartley's expression remained impassive. "Are they, doctor? Look at the latest scans and tell me what you see." I couldn't argue with the evidence. Jackson's brain scans showed activity in regions that should have been dormant in humans. Martinez's internal organs were restructuring themselves into configurations no medical textbook had ever documented. A monitoring system was installed in the isolation area, allowing us to observe the subjects without direct contact. I spent hours watching the feeds, documenting their behavior. None of them slept anymore. Jackson paced his cell continuously, moving with an increasingly fluid grace that seemed to require fewer calories than should have been physically possible. Martinez alternated between periods of complete stillness and bursts of rapid movement, too quick for the cameras to capture clearly. 3 weeks into the isolation period, I reviewed our accumulated data with Dr. Chen and Dr. Kumar. We had collected measurements on everything from cellular metabolism to brainwave patterns. "Their bodies are becoming more efficient," Dr. Chen noted, pointing to the metabolic charts. "They're extracting nearly 95% of the available energy from their food. Human digestion typically manages only 60–70%. Kumar nodded. "And look at these brain scans. The neurons are forming new connection patterns I've never seen before. It's almost as if they're rewiring themselves for a different environment." I finished his thought. By the 1-month mark, all 4 of our original test subjects had undergone multiple chamber exposures, and Colonel Hartley had authorized testing for 11 additional soldiers, bringing the total to 15. All showed signs of transformation. The changes varied in their specifics. Some developed what looked like natural armor plating across their torsos. Others showed signs of additional limb development at the shoulder blades or rib cage. The more advanced cases, like Jackson and Martinez, had begun communicating with each other through a series of clicks and low humming sounds our audio equipment could barely detect. The violence escalated too. After 2 orderlies were seriously injured while delivering food, Colonel Hartley ordered a new containment protocol. Meals were now delivered through small hatches, and all medical tests were conducted remotely using automated systems. I requested a private meeting with Hartley in his office, bringing all our research data and medical reports. "Colonel, we need to stop these experiments immediately," I said, laying out the files on his desk. "The subjects are changing at an accelerating rate. We have no way to predict the end state of these transformations, or whether they can be reversed." Hartley leafed through the reports with unsettling calm. "On the contrary, Dr. Morrison, these results are exactly what we hoped for." I stared at him. "You can't be serious. These people are losing their humanity." "They're gaining something else," he replied. "Imagine soldiers with natural armor plating that can stop bullets, troops who can go days without sleep or food, fighters with enhanced strength and sensory capabilities beyond normal human limits." "They're becoming increasingly violent and unpredictable," I countered. "Several no longer respond to verbal commands at all." Hartley closed the file. "That's just a training issue. We'll develop protocols to maintain control. These are human beings, not weapons. They volunteered for service to their country," Hartley said flatly, "and they're providing that service. The chamber has military applications we've only begun to explore." I left his office knowing the experiments would continue. That night, I reviewed the security footage from the isolation cells again, watching as Private Jackson, or what used to be Private Jackson, moved around his cell with inhuman grace. His transformation was the most advanced of all the subjects. The protrusions on his skull had developed into a crown-like structure, and his skin had hardened into what looked like flexible plates. As I watched, he turned toward the camera suddenly, as if sensing my observation. His eyes, now entirely covered by a reflective blue film, stared directly into the lens. I couldn't shake the feeling that despite all the changes, Something of the young soldier remained inside that transformed body, something trapped and aware of what was happening to him. My phone buzzed with a facility-wide alert. All research staff were to report to the main conference room in 30 minutes. No explanation given. When I arrived, the room was already half full with tense scientists speaking in hushed tones. Dr. Chen nodded at me from across the room, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd been sleeping as poorly as I had. Dr. Kumar sat nearby, making notes on a tablet. "Any idea what this is about?" I asked as I took a seat beside them. Chen shook her head. "Something big. The military personnel have been running around like ants since dawn." The door opened, and Colonel Hartley entered, followed by a woman I hadn't seen before. She stood, about 5'10", with silver-gray hair cut in a severe style that framed a face etched with authority. Her uniform displayed the insignia of a general, along with rows of commendation ribbons. The room fell silent instantly. "Attention," Hartley announced. "General Patricia Hayes, Director of Special Weapons Development." General Hayes didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've reviewed your research on the chamber. The transformation effects on human subjects are interesting but secondary to our main objective. From this point forward, we're shifting focus to the spatial displacement properties." She gestured to an aide who distributed folders to each of us. "These contain your new research directives. We're preparing to send equipment through the chamber to map the tunnel system." I flipped through the documents, noting the aggressive timeline and focus on creating what they called transit probes. I raised my hand. "Dr. Morrison," Hayes acknowledged, her tone suggesting she knew exactly who I was. "General, we've tried sending electronic equipment through the chamber before. Everything from simple cameras to complex sensors. They all malfunction inside. The chamber generates electromagnetic disturbances that render most electronics useless." Hayes gave me a dismissive look. "We've developed specially shielded equipment that should withstand the chamber's effects. Your team will begin testing these prototypes immediately." The meeting continued with Hayes outlining a rigid schedule for the coming weeks. Each research team received specific assignments focusing on different aspects of the chamber's properties. My group was tasked with analyzing the directional consistency of the tunnel phenomenon. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked around the clock preparing and testing probes. Just as I'd predicted, most failed. The first generation of shielded devices disappeared into the chamber and never transmitted data. The second generation lasted slightly longer, sending garbled readings for approximately 20 seconds before going silent. The third generation incorporated biological components, tissue samples from the transformed soldiers, but these performed even worse, disintegrating almost immediately. General Hayes called another meeting after the latest failure. This time, only senior researchers were present. "Our conventional approaches aren't working," she stated bluntly. "It's time to implement Phase Omega." She activated a wall screen displaying technical specifications for what appeared to be a modified nuclear warhead. "This is a low-yield tactical nuclear device," Hayes explained. "We intend to send it through the chamber, track its position using passive radiation signatures, and detonate it once it reaches sufficient distance." The room fell silent. I stared at the screen, certain I'd misunderstood. "You want to detonate a nuclear weapon inside the tunnel system?" I finally asked. "Correct. The explosion will provide valuable data on the tunnel's structure and resilience. With all due respect, General, that's incredibly dangerous," I said. "We have no idea what space these tunnels occupy or how a nuclear detonation might affect them." Hayes fixed me with a cold stare. "Your concerns are noted, Doctor, but this decision comes directly from the Joint Chiefs. The strategic value of understanding and potentially controlling these tunnels outweighs the theoretical risks." "Theoretical?" I stood up, unable to contain myself. "There's nothing theoretical about detonating a nuclear device in an unknown space that's already transforming human biology. We could be looking at catastrophic consequences." "Such as?" Hayes challenged. We don't know. That's precisely the point. We're dealing with phenomena that violate fundamental laws of physics. Adding nuclear energy to that equation is like throwing a match into a room you suspect might contain gas without checking first. Colonel Hartley stepped forward. Dr. Morrison, that's enough. Hayes held up her hand. No, let him speak. I want to hear these supposed catastrophic scenarios. I took a deep breath. The chamber creates tunnels through space-time. A nuclear explosion could destabilize those tunnels, create permanent rifts, accelerate the transformative effects, or spread radiation through passages leading to who knows where. We simply don't have enough data to predict the outcome. Hayes looked unimpressed. The test will proceed as scheduled in 1 week. You're all dismissed. I left the meeting stunned. A nuclear test was scheduled to happen in a week, and no one outside this facility even knew about it. That night, I called an emergency meeting with the other senior scientists in Dr. Chen's quarters, one of the few places we knew wasn't monitored. They can't be serious, Dr. Williams said after I explained the situation. They're very serious, I replied, and unless we can convince them otherwise, they're going to detonate a nuclear weapon inside the chamber tunnel in 1 week. Dr. Kumar adjusted his glasses. Let's approach this systematically. What do we know about the potential outcomes? For hours, we calculated scenarios. Dr. Chen ran models of tunnel collapse based on our limited understanding of the spatial dynamics. Dr. Torres projected blast radius effects in various dimensional configurations. Dr. Park analyzed potential radiation dispersion patterns. The results were uniformly alarming. In the best-case scenario, the detonation would simply destroy the chamber's unique properties. In the worst case, it could tear open permanent rifts in space-time or create a runaway transformation effect that might spread beyond the facility. We need to compile this data and present it to Hayes, Dr. Williams suggested. I shook my head. She won't listen. She dismissed my concerns without even considering them. This test is happening regardless of what we say. Then what do we do? Dr. Chen asked quietly. I looked around at my colleagues, these brilliant minds trapped underground with me. Someone needs to warn the outside world. Someone needs to expose what's happening here. You're talking about breaking our security agreements, Dr. Kumar said. That's treason. So is conducting unauthorized nuclear tests that could threaten civilian populations, I countered. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in my bunk weighing my options. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would escape and expose the project before the test could happen. Over the next 3 days, I carefully observed security patterns. I noted guard rotations at 30-minute intervals. I watched which doors required key cards, which needed codes, and which used biometric scanning. I timed elevator movements and shift changes. During a routine maintenance check, I managed to glimpse the 6-digit code for the primary elevator. 847229. I repeated it silently until it was burned into my memory. Getting a key card proved more challenging. The cards were kept on lanyards that staff wore around their necks at all times. My opportunity came during a late-night research session when Dr. Foster removed his lanyard to adjust some equipment and left it on the workbench. I casually placed my notebook over it, and when we packed up for the night, I slipped both into my bag. The final piece was the data. I needed evidence to back up my claims. During a scheduled system backup, I connected a micro SD card through a modified pen I'd constructed from parts scavenged around the lab. As the backup ran, my device copied key research files, chamber readings, and video of the transformed soldiers. 3 nights before the scheduled test, I made my move. I waited until 2:30 a.m. when the night shift guards typically took their coffee break. The corridor outside my quarters was empty as I slipped out, Dr. Foster's keycard in my pocket. I avoided the main hallways, using the maintenance corridors I'd mapped in my mind. At the first security door, I swiped the card and held my breath. The light turned green, and the door unlocked with a soft click. 2 more security doors followed, each opening to the stolen card. I froze twice when I heard footsteps, pressing myself into shadowed corners until the sound passed. The elevator required both a keycard and the code. I swiped Foster's card and punched in 847259, my heart racing. The display lit up, and the elevator began its ascent from the underground complex. As the floors ticked by, I clutched the modified pen containing the micro SD card. All the evidence needed to expose Project Threshold was hidden inside it. If I could just reach the surface, I might be able to prevent a potential catastrophe. The elevator slowed as it approached ground level. The elevator came to a stop and the doors slid open. I held my breath, expecting guards or an alarm, but found myself facing an empty warehouse space. Metal shelves lined the walls, stacked with supply crates and equipment. A row of military vehicles sat in the center, 3 jeeps and 2 larger transport trucks. The large roll-up door at the far end must lead outside. I crept between the vehicles, staying low. Keys hung on a pegboard beside a small office area. I grabbed a set labeled J3 and matched them to the nearest jeep. The warehouse was eerily quiet, with only the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I slipped into the driver's seat and inserted the key with trembling fingers. The engine roared to life, sounding impossibly loud in the silent warehouse. I threw the jeep into gear and accelerated toward the roll-up door. As I approached, I spotted a control panel on the wall and hit the large button. The door began to rise with an industrial groan. Before it had opened fully, I gunned the engine and ducked as the jeep scraped under the rising metal. Outside, a chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter, with a guard booth beside the gate. The guard stepped out, looking confused at the unscheduled vehicle. I didn't slow down. I aimed straight for the gate, praying it would give way. The guard dove aside as I crashed through the barrier. Metal screeched against metal as the gate buckled. Behind me, red lights began to flash across the compound and a siren wailed. The jeep bounced over the rough desert terrain. I gripped the wheel tightly, focusing on putting distance between myself and the facility. In the rearview mirror, headlights appeared, at least 3 vehicles in pursuit. The digital clock on the dashboard read 2:48 a.m. I pushed the accelerator to the floor. The jeep wasn't built for speed, but I had a head start. I needed to reach the highway before they caught up. The desert stretched endlessly under the moonlight. I kept the jeep pointed northwest, remembering from facility maps that a highway lay in that direction. The terrain grew rougher, with the vehicle bouncing over rocks and scrub brush. Each time I glanced back, the pursuing headlights seemed closer. After 20 minutes of driving, a new problem emerged. The fuel gauge hovered just above empty. The jeep must have been due for refueling. I calculated my options. At my current speed, the fuel might last another 20 minutes at most. The highway couldn't be far. The choice was made for me when the engine sputtered. The jeep rolled to a stop on a small rise. The pursuing vehicles were less than a mile behind now, their headlights cutting bright paths through the darkness. I grabbed the modified pen containing the micro SD card and shoved it into my pocket. Then I ran. The hard-packed desert ground made for better footing than I expected. Each breath burned in my lungs as I sprinted toward where the highway should be. Behind me, vehicles stopped where I'd abandoned the jeep. Flashlight beams swept the darkness. Shouted commands carried on the night air. I ran until my legs ached and my lungs felt ready to burst. Just as I was about to collapse, I spotted it, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desert. The highway. I stumbled toward it, falling once and scraping my hands on the rough ground before pushing myself up again. I reached the roadside and looked in both directions. Empty. Not a single vehicle in sight. The pursuing flashlights grew brighter behind me. I needed a miracle. As if in answer, headlights appeared in the distance. A truck was approaching from the south. I moved to the center of the road and waved my arms frantically. The truck slowed, high beams momentarily blinding me. It was a long-haul semi with a weather-beaten cab. The driver, a burly man with thinning hair under a trucker cap, leaned toward the passenger window. "You okay, buddy?" he asked. "Please," I gasped, I need a ride, right now. He glanced past me to where flashlight beams bounced in the darkness. You in some kind of trouble? Yes, I admitted, but not the kind you're thinking. I'm a scientist. Those people are trying to stop me from exposing something dangerous. He hesitated, then reached across to push open the passenger door. Get in. I scrambled into the cab as shouts echoed from behind. Drive, I urged. Please just drive. The truck lurched forward, picking up speed. In the side mirror, I watched as several military personnel reached the highway, too late to stop us. Name's Carl, the driver said, eyeing me cautiously. Carl Peterson. What's your story? Sam Morrison, I replied, still catching my breath. Thank you for stopping. You probably saved my life. Those were military back there, Carl noted. What did you do? Steal secrets or something? Or something, I said. I need to get to a phone. Somewhere they won't find me immediately. Carl drove in silence for a few minutes. There's a gas station about 30 miles up, old place, but they've got a payphone. That work? I nodded, relief washing over me. Perfect. We rode in tense silence. Every few minutes I checked the mirrors for pursuing vehicles. Carl didn't press me for details, which I appreciated. He turned on the radio to a late-night talk show, the host's voice filling the awkward space between us. You look like you haven't slept in days, Carl eventually commented. I haven't, I admitted. Not really. The gas station appeared as a lone outpost of light in the dark desert, a single-story building with faded paint and 2 ancient pumps out front. A flickering sign advertised, "Last stop 60 miles." This good? Carl asked as he pulled in. Yes. Thank you again. You sure you'll be okay? Middle of nowhere at 3:30 in the morning. I'll be fine, I assured him. You've done more than enough. Carl hesitated, then reached into his wallet and pulled out 2 $20 bills. Take this, for food or whatever. I accepted the money gratefully. I'll pay you back someday. Don't worry about it, he said with a slight smile. Just hope whatever you're doing is worth all this trouble. I climbed down from the cab. It is. It's about saving lives. Carl nodded, then put the truck in gear. I watched as he pulled back onto the highway and disappeared into the night. The gas station was empty except for a sleepy attendant behind the counter. I bought a coffee and asked about the payphone. He pointed to a booth near the restrooms. I dropped coins into the slot and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. M.O. Hello? Rebecca Thompson, I asked. Yes. Who is this? Her voice sharpened with annoyance at the early hour. It's Sam Morrison from Columbia. A pause. Sam, it's 4 in the morning. What's going on? I need your help, I said. I have a story, the biggest of your career. Military experiments, human subjects, a nuclear test that could have catastrophic consequences. Sam, slow down. Are you okay? No, I admitted. I'm not. I just escaped from a classified facility. They're looking for me. I need you to come right away. I have evidence. Where are you? I described the gas station and its location as best I could. That's 3 hours from Vegas, she said. I can be there by 7. Please hurry, I urged. And Rebecca, come alone. Don't tell anyone. This had better be real, Sam. It's real, I promised. Too real. I hung up and bought another coffee and a sandwich, settling in to wait. The attendant gave me curious looks but didn't ask questions. I sat at a small table by the window, watching the road in both directions. The sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky when Rebecca's car pulled into the parking lot. She looked much the same as I remembered. Shoulder-length chestnut hair, sharp green eyes, practical clothes. She spotted me through the window and walked in with purpose. Sam, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. You look terrible. Thanks, I managed a weak smile. It's good to see you too. What's going on? What kind of trouble are you in? I glanced at the attendant, who was now watching us with open curiosity. Let's talk outside. We walked to her car and sat inside with the engine running for privacy. I pulled the modified pen from my pocket and carefully extracted the micro SD card. Everything's on here, I explained, handing it to her. Video files, research data, subject records, I need you to publish it all as quickly as possible. Rebecca examined the tiny card. What exactly am I looking at? I took a deep breath. The military found something in the Nevada desert. A chamber that defies the laws of physics. Objects placed inside it float, suspended in perfect gravitational equilibrium. But that's not all. The chamber creates tunnels through space-time. People who enter disappear and reappear miles away. Rebecca's expression remained neutral, professional. And the human subjects? Soldiers who volunteered for testing. After multiple exposures to the chamber, they began to change, physically transform. Their DNA altered into something not human anymore. I rubbed my eyes, the lack of sleep making it hard to focus. The military sees it as a potential weapon. They've moved the transformed soldiers to isolation cells, and now they're planning to detonate a nuclear device inside one of the tunnels to map its properties. When? 2 days from now, I said. The public needs to know. Congress needs to know. Someone has to stop this test before it happens. Rebecca tucked the SD card into her jacket pocket. I'll need to verify some of this. The evidence is all there, but you need to move quickly. Once they realize what I've taken. I stopped as a vehicle appeared on the highway, then another. Black SUVs with government plates. They turned toward the gas station. They found me, I said, my heart sinking. Rebecca reached for her car door. I should go. No. I grabbed her arm. If they see you driving away now, they'll follow you. Stay put. Act like a customer who just stopped for gas. Once they take me, wait 15 minutes, then leave normally. The SUVs pulled into the parking lot, surrounding Rebecca's car. Men in suits and tactical gear emerged, weapons drawn. Dr. Morrison, one called through a megaphone. Exit the vehicle with your hands visible. I looked at Rebecca. Publish everything. Today, it's the only way to stop the test. I will, she promised. I opened the car door and stepped out with my hands raised. I'm not resisting, I called. 2 agents approached cautiously. One spun me around and pulled my arms behind my back while the other secured handcuffs around my wrists. They patted me down thoroughly. Samuel Morrison, you're under arrest for theft of classified materials and violation of your security agreement, the first agent stated formally. As they led me toward one of the SUVs, I turned for one last look at the desert stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere beneath that sand, miles below the surface, was the chamber, a doorway to somewhere else, transforming humans into something unrecognizable. And in 2 days, unless Rebecca succeeded, they would detonate a nuclear weapon inside it. I could only hope I'd done enough to stop them. I sat on a thin mattress in a military detention cell, my back against the cold concrete wall. The cell measured approximately 8 feet by 10 feet, with a simple metal toilet in one corner and a small sink beside it. A single overhead light embedded in the ceiling cast harsh illumination that never dimmed. No windows, just 3 solid walls and one with steel bars. The floor was bare concrete, chilling the soles of my feet through my thin socks. They had taken my shoes, along with my belt, watch, and the empty pen casing after thoroughly searching me. The guards had brought me to this facility directly from the gas station. During the transport, I had been blindfolded again, much like my first journey to Project Threshold, but this time with my hands cuffed behind my back and armed escorts pressing close on either side. The drive had taken hours, and I spent it calculating what Rebecca might do with the information I'd given her, how quickly she could verify and publish it. I had no way to track time in the cell. My body suggested I'd been here at least 12 hours, but exhaustion made everything blur together. I hadn't slept properly in days, even before my escape attempt. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jackson's transformed face staring at the camera, or imagined the flash of a nuclear detonation inside the tunnels. The cell door opened with a metallic clank. 2 military police officers stood outside. "On your feet," one of them ordered. I stood slowly, my muscles stiff from sitting on the hard surface. "Hands behind your back." They cuffed me again and led me down a sterile hallway with numbered doors. We stopped at a room labeled Interview 3. One guard opened the door while the other guided me inside. The room contained a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs on opposite sides. General Hayes sat in one, a folder open in front of her. No one else was present. "Sit down, Dr. Morrison," she said without looking up. The guards pushed me into the empty chair, then left the room. My handcuffs remained on. Hayes closed the folder and fixed me with a cold stare. "You've created quite a problem." I said nothing, holding her gaze. "The woman you met at the gas station, Rebecca Thompson, what exactly did you tell her?" I weighed my options carefully. The micro SD card contained everything: the chamber data, the video of transformed soldiers, the nuclear test plans. If Rebecca hadn't published yet, confirming what I'd shared might put her at risk. "I want to speak to a lawyer," I said. Hayes's expression didn't change. "You signed away that right when you agreed to work on a black project. Your security clearance paperwork specifically waived standard legal representation in cases of national security breaches. That doesn't make it constitutional. The Supreme Court has upheld such waivers for classified military research." She leaned forward. "Now tell me what you shared with Ms. Thompson." "No." Hayes studied me for a long moment. "You know what happens next, don't you? You'll be charged with treason. The penalty for that is quite severe." "Is that supposed to scare me into talking, after what I've seen in that facility?" She opened the folder again and slid out a photograph. It showed Rebecca's car at the gas station. "We know you gave her something. Our agents searched you thoroughly. Whatever you had when you escaped, you no longer had when we found you." I kept my face neutral despite the spike of fear. They didn't know about the modified pen or the micro SD card specifically. They were fishing. "The nuclear test is scheduled for tomorrow," I said. "You're running out of time to stop it." "The test will proceed as planned," Hayes replied. "Your interference has changed nothing except your own future." The interrogation continued for hours. Hayes cycled through threats, implied leniency if I cooperated, and cold, calculating analysis of my motivations. I remained silent or repeated my request for legal counsel. Eventually, she called the guards to return me to my cell. The next day, I assumed it was the next day from the new guards on duty, the process repeated. This time, Colonel Hartley joined Hayes in the interrogation room. He looked tired and on edge. "Dr. Morrison," he began, "I respected your work. I thought you understood the importance of what we're doing." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "You're planning to detonate a nuclear weapon inside a spatial anomaly that's already transforming human beings into something else. You have no idea what the consequences might be." "The risks have been calculated," Hayes cut in. "No, they haven't. Dr. Chen, Dr. Kumar, Dr. Williams, all of us ran the models. The potential outcomes range from simply destroying the chamber to creating tears in space-time that could spread uncontrollably." Hartley exchanged a glance with Hayes. "We've reviewed those models. Our analysts reached different conclusions." Because they were told what conclusions to reach, I shot back. The questions continued. What had I taken? What had I shared? Who else knew? Each time I refused to answer. After this session, they didn't return me to the cell but placed me in a smaller holding room next to what appeared to be a guard station. Through the open door, I could see a desk with monitors and a small television mounted on the wall. The TV was tuned to a news channel, but the volume was too low for me to hear. I sat quietly, conserving my energy, wondering if Rebecca had published anything yet. Then the screen changed to show a news anchor looking serious, with text at the bottom reading breaking news. The guards turned up the volume. We continue our top story. Shocking allegations of illegal government experimentation in the Nevada desert. Investigative journalist Rebecca Thompson has published documents and video allegedly showing a secret military program called Project Threshold, where soldiers were subjected to unknown forces that physically transformed them into what one scientist described as no longer human. The screen split to show Rebecca being interviewed. She looked composed and professional, despite what must have been a frantic couple of days verifying and preparing the story. The documents I've obtained indicate the military planned to detonate a nuclear weapon as part of these experiments, potentially endangering civilians in multiple states, she was saying. The guard nearest the TV muttered a curse and reached to change the channel, but stopped when the other guard said, "Wait, I want to hear this." The report continued, showing heavily redacted documents and blurred video footage that I recognized from the chamber observations. They cut to protesters gathering outside what appeared to be a military installation, holding signs reading "No nuclear tests" and "Human experiments, some are crimes against humanity." The anchor reappeared. Congressional leaders from both parties are demanding immediate investigations, and the governor of Nevada has called the alleged testing an unconscionable risk to citizens. The Department of Defense has issued a statement neither confirming nor denying the existence of Project Threshold, but assuring the public that no unauthorized nuclear testing is taking place. I couldn't help the small smile that formed on my lips. She did it. Rebecca had published the story and people were listening. The guards noticed my expression and quickly turned off the TV. One of them grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. "Back to your cell." Over the next several hours, I noticed increased activity in the hallway outside my cell. Guards spoke in hushed tones, and higher-ranking officers appeared, looking tense. Nobody told me anything, but the atmosphere had clearly changed. Late that night, a guard I hadn't seen before brought a tray of food. As he slid it through the slot in the bars, he glanced over his shoulder and spoke quietly. "They've postponed the test, indefinitely. Places surrounded by protesters and media. Senators are calling for heads to roll." Before I could respond, he walked away. I sat on my cot, food forgotten, relief washing over me. The test was stopped. Whatever happened to me now, that much at least, had been accomplished. Early the next morning, I was roused from a fitful sleep and told to prepare for transport. 2 guards entered my cell with fresh clothes, not my own, but plain khakis and a button-down shirt instead of the jumpsuit they'd given me initially. "Where are we going?" I asked as I changed. "Different facility," one guard answered curtly. They handcuffed me again, though this time in front rather than behind my back, and led me to a transport van with tinted windows. Inside, I was shocked to find Dr. Lisa Chen already seated. "Lisa," I exclaimed. "Are you okay?" She looked tired but unharmed. Better than expected, all things considered. The guards instructed us not to talk, but once the van started moving, they seemed less concerned with enforcing the rule. "What happened after I left?" I asked quietly. Lisa glanced at the guards, who were talking between themselves in the front seats. "They questioned everyone. When they couldn't find you, or the missing data, they detained all the senior researchers. Robert, Sarah, Michael, everyone. I'm sorry you were caught up in this." She gave me a small smile. "Don't be. The story broke yesterday morning. By afternoon, everything was chaos. Military brass flying in, government officials demanding answers. The nuclear test is officially canceled." "Where are they taking us?" "Some kind of holding facility for debriefing, less restrictive than where we've been. I think they're trying to figure out damage control." The drive took about an hour. When we arrived, I saw a sprawling government complex that looked more administrative than military. Inside, we were processed separately, then taken to what amounted to dormitory-style housing. Each of us had a small private room with a real bed, desk, and bathroom. The door locked from the outside, but the accommodations were a significant improvement. Throughout the day, other familiar faces appeared. Dr. Kumar arrived looking disheveled, but gave me a subtle nod of approval when we passed in the hallway. Dr. Williams arrived later, followed by Dr. Torres and others from the research team. We were allowed to gather in a common area for meals. The first time we all sat together, the conversation was cautious, with many glances toward the guards stationed at the doors. "We're all facing serious charges," Dr. Kumar said quietly, "violating security agreements at minimum. Some of us might be charged with espionage or aiding in classified information theft." "But the test was stopped," I replied. "That's what matters most." Dr. Chen nodded. "The public reaction has been overwhelming. It's not just the nuclear test, it's the human experimentation. The videos of Jackson and the others, even heavily redacted, they're disturbing enough to demand accountability." "Have you heard anything about the subjects?" I asked. "Jackson, Martinez, the others?" Everyone shook their heads. Dr. Williams looked particularly troubled. "That's my greatest concern. Whatever happens to us, those soldiers deserve proper medical care, not isolation cells." "Do you think they can be helped?" Dr. Torres asked. "Return to normal?" No one had an answer for that. The next morning, new people arrived at the facility, men and women in professional attire carrying briefcases and tablets. They were introduced as investigators from various government oversight committees: intelligence, armed services, ethics in military research. We were told we would each be interviewed individually over the coming days. The charges against us remained in place, but cooperation could potentially affect the outcomes of our cases. That evening, in the common room, Dr. Kumar found me staring out the window at the desert landscape. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "I want you to know you did the right thing." "I hope so," I replied. "But I keep thinking about that chamber. What it is, why it's there, who or what built it. And those tunnels? Where do they really lead? Somewhere else on Earth? Or somewhere else entirely?" Kumar adjusted his glasses. "Perhaps those questions are better left unanswered." "But the transformed soldiers," I continued. "What happens to them now? Are they still changing? Can they ever come back?" "I don't know," he admitted. "The chamber remains a mystery. A doorway to somewhere else that changes anyone who enters too often into something no longer human. Perhaps some mysteries should stay buried." I wasn't so sure. As I watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and red, I thought about Jackson's eyes looking directly into the camera. Something was still in there, aware and watching. Something that had once been a young man named Daniel Jackson, before he stepped into a chamber that defied the laws of physics and opened doorways through space and time.